So just as a reminder, the District Avenue Roundabout was a project that was identified as part of the long-range transportation plan. Based on the cost estimate that was developed as part of the long-range transportation plan, it's approximately $8.4 million. That will likely increase a little bit, considering when it was developed and adding VDOT contingencies and things like that. This was a staff recommended project, and staff is recommending that minimal additional engagement would be required if this project is selected to move forward. The next project is the Hillsdale Avenue extension. We submitted this as part of the round 4 smart scale application process, and at that point, the estimated cost with all of the contingencies was a little bit over $34 million. So this was recommended as part of the hydraulic small area plan, and it is on the LRTP, the long range transportation constraint list, that short list of prioritized projects. However, because of the project cost, it is not likely to score competitively. And for that reason alone, staff did not feel like this should be one of the projects that's recommended for the MPO's submissions at this time. What we will say is that because this is identified as a high priority project, one opportunity could be that the PDC has an additional number of application slots that we can also submit for applications. So if we get to the point where we're ready to develop applications and not all of those slots are selected, we could go ahead and include this Hillsdale Avenue extension project as one of the PDC's projects at that point. But staff felt that it didn't make sense to prioritize this as one of our applications, knowing it likely wouldn't score well enough to be funded. The Ravenna River Bike and Pedestrian Crossing is one that you are all probably familiar with already. There was a feasibility study, as you may recall, that was completed in 2020 that developed a couple of configurations that were possible to put a pedestrian bridge. There are still a number of considerations that would have to be worked out. For that, one of those that the staff discussed was that the estimated cost for the two scenarios that were developed by both consultants, which are the two configurations shown in red. One of them was estimated at $11 million, and the other one just over $15 million. So in the staff discussion, they suggested maybe we continue to look to see if there's some opportunities to reduce the cost for that project by either considering if there's an opportunity to phase it somehow, or looking at maybe some additional configurations or construction opportunities, but just spending a little bit of time looking at opportunities to reduce that cost further to make it more competitive, and then also doing some additional public engagement. The configuration that's shown in blue was an alternate configuration that was suggested by a CTAC member. And it was a strong suggestion from staff that if this project is selected, which they are recommending it would be, that this one needs some additional engagement and support to move it forward. So as part of that process, we could look at whether there are configurations in addition to the two that were developed in red, such as the one shown in blue, that might help address some of those concerns that staff has identified that would need to be addressed moving forward. So that brings us to the Avon Street multimodal improvements. And you may recall that what we started with was looking at a project that would support multimodal connectivity through this corridor. And the outline in red shows the initial boundaries of the corridor that we were looking at. And after having this conversation with the staff, again, the planning staff from Charlottesville, Albemarle, as well as VDOT, they have identified what they feel like is the best opportunity to look at the multi-jurisdictional interconnectivity for the bicycle and pedestrian network. And so they're recommending that out of this Avon corridor that we develop an application for basically providing a cohesive bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure starting at Druid Avenue, which is in the city, and that's also where there's a bike lane that stops there. So it would look at opportunities to continue that bike and pedestrian infrastructure from Druid Avenue to at least Avon Court Park, which is located in Albemarle County. And this is right where there's a park and ride on the east side of the road there. It is possible that, we could look at what the project costs are and see if we could extend that farther south as part of this application, but the priority would be getting it at least to that park and ride in the county. The County of Albemarle just recently completed a corridor study for Avon Street, and so staff at this point believes that maybe there needs to be some minimal engagement at this point, but does not believe that there needs to be a large effort to do a robust public engagement, since they feel like they've already got some good feedback. We could reconvene, the groups that were involved with developing the recommendations as we have specific project applications that are ready to move forward, but they do not anticipate that this needs a lot of additional engagement at this time. All right, the 5th Street multimodal improvements, again, VDOT just recently completed a project studying this corridor, and so there were some specific recommendations that came out of it. What was recommended again by the staff that met to discuss the project options was that they felt that they already had a pretty strong project that they had identified that they wanted to move forward, and that's looking at some of these intersection improvements at the 5th Street and 5th Street Station Parkway intersection. Those intersection improvements were estimated in that plan to be about $2.8 million. And then also expanding the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure to include sidewalks, and I believe it was in on the road bikeway that was suggested to move forward as part of that plan. So the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure would connect into the 5th Street Hudson Trail project that was approved for funding as part of the Round 4 Smart Scale. So this would again extend the existing extend the stream to the existing bicycle infrastructure further north and developing a stronger network there, as well as making some improvements of that intersection. And then this last project, I'm not sure if you all have had a chance to review this or not, but this was a suggestion from one of the CTAC members, which we are referring to as a flyover. So just to give you a little sense of direction, this is a project, this is a grade separated ramp with an entrance point on 250, this is 250 right here. So the entrance onto the ramp would be on 250 west of the intersection between 250 and Hydraulic Road. So cars would enter or exit at this point. And then basically once they got on the ramp, they stayed on the ramp until they got through the intersection. And so then the next exit and entrance point would be up 29 North near Seminole Court. So again, this would be a grade separated ramp that moves traffic from between 250 and Hydraulic Road, removing those vehicles from having to make turning movements to the interchange. So the CTAC member that's recommending this estimated that the cost would be $50 million. But at this point, this has not been recommended as part of the 29 small area plan. It's not supported in any of the local or regional adopted plans. And because of the project cost is also not anticipated to score competitively. So for those reasons, this project is not recommended by staff at this point. And this table just shows a summary of the staff considerations that went into this and what the staff recommended scenarios are. So you'll recommend at this point that we pursue the District Avenue roundabout, the Riviera River Bikehead crossing with additional public engagement, the Avon Street corridor and the 5th Street corridor as the projects that we move forward. And if we have an application slot that is not otherwise being used, we could consider submitting those. So I'd be happy to answer any questions from anyone, or Kevin and Jeanette and Chuck are also available to answer questions. And again, what we're going to be asking for is for your recommendation on the projects that we should be requesting the MPO Policy Board to submit as their application, and then which of these projects you would support for additional stakeholder engagement as well as other technical support.
Thanks, Sandy. So we'll go to Juan. Get your hand up for.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the Avon Street one. You know, is there any way to extend that a little further south to go all the way to, I guess, the, what is this, 5th Street Station Parkway intersection?
Yeah, I don't know, Kevin, if you want to say anything about that. I think ideally that's where we would like it to go. Kevin was willing to say maybe we just try to get at least to the parking right for right now, depending on how competitive the application would be. But Kevin, would you like to add anything?
No, I think you covered that. And I mean, I agree with Joanne. It would be nice to get it there. It's just that I think that the cost of the project may become a little unwieldy if we try and do that all in one. And so our thought was that we could get this section done now and then come back in a future round to bring it all the way up to the 5th Street. But you know, maybe once we start looking at this with VDOT and if they have a consultant or anything, if suggestions come out that they think it's still a competitive project, even if we push it to 5th Street Station Parkway, I mean, I'm more than welcome to do that.
And would it also include crosswalks, I guess, or some way for the bike and pedestrian to switch sides of the street, even if it's just within this corridor?
Yeah, I think that will be part of it, is identifying where those crosswalks should be and where those opportunities are. But I'm going to make a note that we make sure that we include those as part of the recommendation. Because I know I don't remember, maybe Jeanette, you can help me. The bike lane is only on the west side of the road up to Druid, is that correct?
In Druid, it's on both sides, but both the bike lane ends and then the sidewalk ends on the western side. So again, extending that and making that creation. But I think crossings would definitely be included in this.
Yeah, I was going to chime in. This is Chuck. The biggest thing is going to be the cost. I think we've got conceptual drawings for most of these already done as a result of the study. So it's just a matter of developing cost estimates for these. And so it shouldn't be too difficult to do it. The other thing is, I think there's a section between, in the city, there's a section that already has sidewalk on both sides from, I forget the name of that street, starts with a P. There's a section from there down to just before you get to this county line, that there's already sidewalk in that portion of it. So really, you could almost do a southern piece and a northern piece, and to make the applications competitive, we want to probably try to keep them as low cost as possible. So the smaller sections might be the better way to handle it, as long as we have a logical termini at both ends.
And Sandy, could you clarify, I guess, exactly how many projects we're supposed to be recommending? Like, is it 4 total and then 2 for engagement? Or is it up to 2 for engagement? You know, I see that you guys only recommend 1, so.
Yeah, you are recommending the 4 projects total that you would like the MPO Policy Board to pursue. Up to 2 of those can involve that higher level of engagement.
Gotcha. And last time we had talked about, or sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
I was going to say, I would also like to state that you can put in up to 5 applications. At final submission, you could only submit 4. So if for some reason they wanted to include Hillsdale Extended as an alternate, initially they could. So they could still put in the 5 applications, and then at the submission time, they'd have to select, which will be in August, they'd have to select which 4 they're gonna put in. For some reason, one of the projects fell out or something.
Gotcha. And last time I think we had discussed potentially that Avon or Fifth could end up being like 2 projects for each of those corridors or for any one of those corridors in order to keep those projects relatively small and score well. So are we still looking at like, 1 for each of those corridors just for those sections, or is there the possibility of adding a second application for one of those 2 or 1 or both?
Yeah, when we talked about this with staff, we had that conversation, and I mean, it really depends on the policy board. It depends on what you all recommend. Staff felt pretty strongly that there were clear projects for each of these. One of the things I will say about Avon Street, and maybe I'll let Kevin talk, is that the county of Albemarle is planning to pursue some of these projects for revenue sharing at the southern end already. So there are some additional applications that are going to be made for some of those. Do you want to say anything about that, Kevin?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to be putting in a revenue sharing application for the bike ped improvements from Mill Creek to Paragory Lane, which is like just south of the interstate there, with the hope that once again in the future we'll just build on that and be able to get a bridge in the future across 64 to Fifth Street Station Parkway from the south.
That would be cool. So what about on Fish Street? I know that's been a topic of a lot of conversation in the community lately with all the fatalities there. Is there, like, obviously, the Carter study recommended a whole bunch of stuff along there. Is there a potential for maybe some stuff further down from this project?
Yeah, I think Fifth Street was the one where it seemed like there was a potential to develop multiple projects. I will just say that, you all can make the recommendation and the policy board can ultimately decide, but what it's going to come down to is there another one of these projects that you all would prioritize less than that second Fifth Street project? Jeanette, do you want to talk, because you were the one who had the idea to potentially have 2 projects. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So, well, one, just like with the county doing the revenue sharing on their, further into the county on Avon, the city is looking as a separate application to have another smart scale application for Fifth Street that's, further into the city. So north of Harris Road. So that's one. And then if we were to do a 5th application, which I would kind of hesitate to do simply because 4 applications is a big lift for staff on the city side alone. And then on top of that, we'll probably support the MPO with their 4 applications. So the only thing that I suggested was that if we focused on one corridor, so kind of complete Avon or complete Fifth. So that was an idea. Or like we're doing here, we do a little on Fifth and a little on Avon. So we're helping different areas of our community at the same time. So it just depends on what the committee recommends and policy board wants to do.
So I guess along the lines of prioritizing projects, how do you all feel about District Ave? I know last time, I think they're a little more bearish on District. I think there were some space constraints. But I think I heard that in policy, Chuck mentioned that you kind of just shift where it goes and the size of it or the shape of it to make it work. Do we feel that that's a high priority project still? What's committee's thought?
I will let Kevin and Chuck respond to that.
Chuck, you want to start?
I mean, the only reason I brought it up is because the smaller costs might have a higher benefit and might be more apt to fund. But I mean, you can look at the whole corridor or you can break it up into pieces. over several applications. I know we did that with several applications in the past. We've done it in other parts of the district, and a lot of times you'll get more projects funded that way, but you don't want to get a piece here and then have a gap and then have another piece funded, and then you got a gap between the two. So, I mean, you have to consider all that moving forward. But the only reason I brought up the Avon Street piece, because I know there's a section that's already got sidewalk that was put in by developers, and there's a piece to the north that doesn't have sidewalk and bike lanes, and then there's a section from where that starts all the way in near the county, city-county line, all the way to the park and ride lot, which doesn't have facilities. So do you want to do it as two separate applications, or do it as one with a part in the middle that you don't have to do a whole lot on? I don't think it matters. It's just how much it adds to the cost to combine them, and how that affects your competitiveness in the scoring piece of smart scale.
And Rory, you were asking about District Avenue, though. I think, when we were ranking these projects, we were having like a staff level discussion about them, and District Avenue was, was probably lower on the list of what we see here, but it was still a reasonable project that we felt like showed some benefits and thought that it was worthwhile to at least make an attempt to move forward on. There's, some congestion and safety issues that are ongoing out there. And we want to see what we can do to try and make some improvements. But it was, I think that probably the last project on the list as we were looking at them.
I can add to that too. I mean, I looked up the V-Trans needs, and to the east, on the east segment, it's at District Avenue, it's a priority 2 V-Trans need, and on the west segment, it's a priority 3 V-Trans need. With the additional development, we're going to have to look at reconfiguring the roundabout and shifting it around a little bit to actually make it fit. It originally was a necessary thing we had to do to actually make the intersection improvements at Hydraulic and 29 work. Now that we went away from that concept from round 3, it's not as much of a need. So it's still a need, but it's in that middle ground area. So that's what I'd like to add.
And so when you move it around, is that going to change the impacts that it's going to have on the city side of that? Because I think last time Kevin had mentioned the Stonefield Apartments or hotel it's going in is going to come right up to the corner. And I think in the original plan, we're going to take 2 houses for it. Is that going to be more now? Kind of shifting it southward?
We'll have to look at it in more detail. And we haven't done that yet to see what the impacts are going to be. And that would be the next step moving forward, if this is one of the ones that the MPO wants to pursue. So we're waiting to see, and then we'll have to look at it and redo the concept, and then bring it back and for public input. And that's where we'll look at the the engagement with the public on what the new concept would look like and get the feedback at that point.
In that development on the north west quadrant of that intersection, it did leave some room for the roundabout. We had told the developer that there was a proposal for that, and so they backed it off a little bit from it. And there's, it doesn't seem to me like you would need more than those 2 properties on the city side there, which are, I think both of them are occupied by businesses, not homes at this point. Yeah, but I think that, this concept really seems to show it a little bit larger than it necessarily needs to be. So I think the 2 properties would be the maximum, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, that's what I said. If you look at it, it's offset from the current intersection, probably 75 feet. So if you've got a building there, we'd have to shift it back over and then possibly shift it down a little bit. But we can look at the size, and since most of the approaches are slow, I mean, hydraulic is not, but the side streets approaches are both slow, so we don't need to necessarily do as much work on the side streets as we would on hydraulic to get the adequate deflection for the roundabout entries. But we will have to shift it around depending on the footprint of that building.
Gotcha. Other thoughts from the committee? Looking at Google Street View, I think that 1916 Cedar Hill, that looks like the primary property impacted is still a duplex. It might be a little bit out of date. You're right, actually, the one on the east side is a state farm. Though it looks like from that configuration, it might not actually affect the state farm. And so in this recommendation, there would just be one additional engagement item. Does that make sense to you all, or are you seeing another that you feel like would merit additional engagement? Anyone? Tim?
I guess I just like to hear from you folks. What are the 3 or 4 projects that ended up on the cutting room floor?
We really didn't have projects that fell off. We started with the projects that already met this criteria. That was the criteria that was developed all along. I think what we did was we whittled down, just looking at Avon Street and Fifth Street corridor, from looking at the entire corridor to whittling down which of the projects that were developed as part of those plans should move forward as an application. Honestly, I was anticipating that maybe that's where the public engagement would be taking the recommendations from those corridors and developing projects out of those, and that would be the public engagement. But staff already had a pretty clear idea from the engagement that had been completed already as to which of those projects made sense to move forward that would benefit those the city and county as jurisdictions. Do Kevin or Jeanette or Chuck, do you all want to add anything else?
I think you should go with the staff's recommendations, of course. So the city we think these are good projects. They're supported, just like Sandy said, with all of our long-range plans, past applications, past public involvement pieces. And also keep in mind, we're still looking at a $28 million bucket of money. So we're probably going to submit for $50 million worth of projects from the MPO alone. Forget the city, forget the county, and forget every other jurisdiction. So that's why our focus has been on past projects that pretty much are well established and are reasonably priced.
And I'll just add to that to address Tim's question. The only projects that really came off or fell off the list here are those 2 that you see in red. The county will move forward with at least 4 projects of our own that we'll be submitting that are still, are a lot of our higher priorities. So we have other projects that we're going to submit. It's just that these are the ones, and we may even, request the TJPDC submit a project or 2 on our behalf. So there are other projects that we're moving forward with. It's just that these are the ones we're focused on with the MPO and through their process.
And Kevin, you mentioned the one. Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, I was going to weigh in that we have 2 other studies that we're working on too that were, we had to go through a process of looking at the V-Trans needs and identifying several locations that are priority one needs, which are the highest priority in the plan. And we have two of them in the MPO area. One of them's out at Shadwell, and the other one is the Pantops area from Hanson's Road out to the interstate. And we're actually doing studies on those. So those could be some candidates that could be possibly considered in the spring too. And those might be candidates that the TJPDC could possibly submit if there's some options or some free application that could be filled.
Jeanette?
The only thing that I would like to add, it kind of sounds like we've settled on these four. I don't know if the committee agrees, but there's been no discussion about this 29-250 flyover. And I don't know if the committee wants to discuss that or pass a recommendation on to the policy board that we really are not in support of that project.
I can say a few things about it myself. This is one of those projects that's it's been looked at several times in multiple plans over the time I've been in Charlottesville, starting back in the H250 days before Places 29 and all that stuff took off. And then the 29 corridor study that we looked at, they had a flyover presentation. I know in the even with Solutions 29, I mean Hydraulic 29, we had some discussions about a flyover at this location, but they hadn't really garnished any support from the public through any of those studies. So that's one point. The second point is there's not really been a study per se on that type of improvement. So we'd have to actually do that study and look at other alternatives and to actually even submit that application. So I think there's still a lot of work that would have to be done on that project to actually get it to a point where it would be submittable. The other thing is, I know that just looking at from a cursory standpoint, especially on the 250 end of it, you're really close to Barracks Road interchange, and he didn't really show that. And the interaction between those two ramps could mean that we'd have to widen the bridge at Barracks Road to extend those ramps across Barracks Road. So there's still some holes in it that need to be resolved if we wanted to look at it. I haven't really had my L&D section look at it to really validate what he's showing, whether it's feasible in the configuration he's got, and then what the cost estimate will ultimately be. He does supply some additional information about what the benefits of it are, but you really can't take credit for those like bike and pedestrian improvements if you don't put them in. So it's got to stand on its own merit. And the $50 million cost, that's more than any project we've ever gotten funded in this district. So we saw that with the Hydraulic 29 studies where we put in those $100 million projects and they were like tanked. And we have to come back the next round and reevaluate them and come up with something that's fundable. And that's what we've done historically in the past with multiple projects. So I think we'd end up doing the same thing with this one if we wanted to move forward with it.
So basically, what I'm hearing is this isn't ready for smart scale in this application. It does not preclude us from, we could still move forward with the round 4 that we've been awarded. And we could still do the flyover later. This recommendation is more ready for the comprehensive plan process that we have coming up in a couple of years.
Correct.
Would that be something that the committee would recommend? The city
Yeah, I would agree
recommends
to
it
that. I
that
mean,
way.
I don't think it's ready to go forward right now without a lot more study and work on it to make sure that it's going to be ready to go and submittable. I mean, because it's an interchange modification, you'd have to go through that interchange modification process. It's adding capacity, so we'd have to do that alternatives analysis piece, and none of that's been done. So, I mean, we'd have to go through that whole intensive study to before we could even submit it as a project.
So from the city's perspective, the current applications that we've been awarded helps to fix the local intersection of 29 and hydraulic, helps with pedestrian movements, etc. This 29-250 is kind of being proposed for a different issue, which is the traffic that is trying to go from 29 to 250 and vice versa.
Correct, and it doesn't include any of those other opportunities. It's just moving vehicular traffic from the 29-250 bypass to 29 north.
So the question I pose is beyond the submittability of the application. Do we really see this, this like 3/4 mile long, 2/3 mile long flyover in the middle of 29 being consistent with our plans and our stated policy goals as a city to, make this a more pedestrian oriented corridor, see mixed use development in this area that's less auto oriented? Or is that going to set back those efforts?
Well, and I've been thinking about that, Rory. This is the most congested, widest roadway in the city. So would a flyover, even though it goes against our general principle of being very low impact, both visually and just with the amount of concrete, and I mean, we just shortened Belmont Bridge and saw quite a bit of savings from it. So here we are building a bridge that's longer than anything we have, and it's high impact. But what if we did that and we could narrow 29? And this is, I'm trying to think of all the past public involvement we've had and past public comment. And maybe this does fit in given where it's located. But I couldn't speak for all the citizens because they haven't had a chance to look at this. And that's what makes me the most uncomfortable.
I think the other thing I just want to add is that based on what Chuck is saying, is that probably in the future we'll have to go back and look at this area again and look at some of these opportunities to resolve the issues at this intersection. But we have to start with looking at what the problem is and identifying all the potential solutions to evaluate them. So I think that's the process we would need to go through if there's interest in this project, is kind of zoom out again. Let's start by identifying what the issues is that we're trying to dissolve, and then go through and look at what all of the alternatives could be to provide that resolution, and then make a decision from there.
I mean, I would agree with Jeanette on that. I mean, if you do this, you're going to take off about 25,000 vehicle trips a day on that section between hydraulic and 250. So it would give you some more, you could transform that core portion of a roadway into a more, not local street, but more similar to what you're doing down south of the bypass on Emmett Street in the city, where you're adding the bike lanes and the multi-use trails without having to get additional right-of-way outside of the corridor. You could possibly shrink it down and add those on the outside, but by reducing the number of lanes through that section. So it does have its advantages, but you'd still have to go through, do this, and then come back and do that. So you can't take credit for that with this project. You'd have to do them as separate projects, but it's something to explore. The other downside to it is I know there was a lot of pushback, I mean, on what does it look like underneath Belmont Bridge? And in some other areas where they do have flyovers, and how does it affect the visualization of the businesses and stuff on that corridor where you've got an elevated structure running down the middle of it? That's something that I can't answer. I think that's something that needs to be definitely vetted through the public and the community to see if that's something they're willing to have along this corridor.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. That is a really good point that you could repurpose the existing road and make it more pedestrian friendly. And also, yeah, I recall in 2009 that when there was a flyover kind of being proposed then, that was a big concern from businesses as well. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree that if it's to be considered, it should be as part of a more comprehensive process of considering it in the whole corridor, and not just the flyover, just to build a flyover without those other improvements being contemplated. Does anyone else have other thoughts on that? And do we want to explicitly say that in a separate motion, separate from our recommendations? I'm very talkative today, folks.
Rory, can I clarify what you're asking? Are you asking if we should make one motion with the recommended projects to move forward and a second motion to, can you fill in that blank? Just make sure I understand clearly.
Yeah. Or, should we fold that into the motion for recommendations, or should we just make a motion for recommendations for the ones that we do recommend, I guess, would be the three options.
It doesn't, I'm not inclined to necessarily make a second recommendation for future studies. I think that it seems like that could be kind of self-explanatory, that even if we're not moving forward with a project now, no matter what project it is, doesn't mean that we might not take a second look at it in the future. But if we're willing, I mean, I'm ready to make a motion for the staff recommendations for the project.
Actually, I was going to ask you another question on that front. So you mentioned earlier that you guys, Albemarle, had a project for Avon Street. Do you have anything for Fish Street further into the county, south of where this is proposed?
Likely. We haven't really discussed that, but yeah, the Avon one I brought up because that's actually already been agreed on as a submittal. So we've already submitted a pre-application for revenue sharing on that one. A Fifth Street project wouldn't happen for revenue sharing, but for this same round of smart scale that we're talking about right now for next year, I can imagine that we may want to make a submission, especially for additional bike ped in that corridor. We've got, like I think I've mentioned, the ABC development at Old Lynchburg Road and Fifth Street is going to be, well, we're going to have that roundabout that they're contributing to, and they're also putting in a shared use path with Southwood continuing to develop and likely going to be coming back for another phase soon. I think extending that shared use path south to Sunset is a project that is a high priority for the county to continue that. And at some point we need to move it towards the city. It's just that we don't know how to deal with the interchange yet. So.
Yep. And then I guess the follow-up question would be, to implement the full corridor studies recommendations, or to improve this whole segment we're seeing here, how many smart scale rounds or revenue sharing rounds do you think that's, or various projects, do you think that's going to take?
I can give that a shot. The interchange modifications are probably going to be the last thing that's done. And it's just a matter of whether we do some minor modifications or whether we do a interchange reconfiguration. And I don't think we're ready to consider that yet moving forward. It may be something we consider the following round, or possibly as part of the long range plan update, and then a round after that maybe. So, but like Kevin was saying, there's probably 2 additional projects south of 64, and then we'll have another project, depending on where this current project termini is, there may be another project to the north, in addition to the interchange. But it just depends on how big you want the projects to be. Old Lynchburg Road is sort of the center point. The south is more or less a road diet for the most part. And then the north is extension of the shared use path, but there are some recommendations for some intersection improvements, primarily at Stagecoach, that could be done as a project with the shared use path. And that would take you up close to the interstate.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, so my inclination would not be to make the project bigger, but to add a project and remove that District Avenue project, which it sounds like is kind of more of a nice to have to smooth traffic flow a little bit than a need to have at this point. It's gonna, probably involve a taking of at least 2 of relatively affordable homes. So that's at about a little under $140,000 each. And if we were to proceed with District Avenue, I would be inclined to say that would be one that we should do engagement for, given the takings. And I mean, I can't speak for council, obviously, but it does seem like something that they might hesitate on, given that, right? And given the high importance of affordable housing to them at this point. And to Jeanette's point earlier, like, I would love to see really tackle big chunks of the corridor at once. I mean, obviously with the caveat that we probably won't get all of our projects approved. But if we could get, that Avon and then 2 chunks of Fish Street in here with the Rivanna project, that seems like a pretty good slate of smart scale projects to me. But what do y'all think?
I agree.
Well, I will add that like I said, I think we are planning to do another smart scale grant for 5th Street as the county on its own, that would be south of the interstate. So unless, I'm not sure what other project we would add in unless it's the actual interchange, which is a pretty significant addition.
Yeah, so I guess the question then for you is like, so we have this chunk up by Fish Street Station and Harris Street, and you have the chunk down by Old Lynchburg. I guess the roundabout is what you're talking about. And then is there not any other large project that you would need inside of the, or aside from the interchange in this stretch? Like, I know Chuck mentioned the south of Old Lynchburg Road diet. Would that be included in your project?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of, is really to go from, south from Old Lynchburg Road, the intersection with 5th Street there at the county office building, going south to the end of the corridor is really the area that I'm considering, or that the county would consider for a smart scale project. North of there is, and I've talked with Chuck about this, there was a recommendation for Stagecoach Road intersection improvements that would have, would probably have some bike ped facilities included in the project. So that's really the only other one there. The rest is really just corridor, more bike ped improvements that I think we would probably tie in with the interchange.
Gotcha. So the shared use path north of Old Lynchburg that Chuck mentioned, is that the Stagecoach Road stuff, or would that all be folded into the interchange project? And I guess the other question is, like, is there a way to knock out some of this stuff south of the interchange in a way that would make the eventual interchange application not too large and unwieldy, that it wouldn't get funded?
I'll have to leave that
I,
to
Kevin, you know,
Chuck.
I
I
mean,
don't
we've
know.
had this, Kevin and I have had this discussion. And like I said, Old Lynchburg Road includes shared use path and the roundabout conversion at the intersection with some improvements on Old Lynchburg Road up to Country Green. So we'll have that done as that project. So it sort of splits the corridor up at that point into two sections. Section south, which we pretty much identified as a road diet in the study, from there all the way to the end of the corridor. So that could be submitted as a project. And then there's a development that's on the corner of Old Lynchburg Road that is looking at, as part of their proffers or site improvements, as providing an extension of the shared use path along their frontage of Fifth Street all the way through Wahoo Way. So, so you'd have that piece already built. And then that leaves you from Wahoo Way pretty much all the way to the interchange. Stagecoach Road, as I said, was identified as an intersection improvement project also. And it would include bike and ped facilities along that portion of it. Depending on which option you use, whether you use the R-cut or roundabout, you could extend it up a certain distance, whether it goes to Parkhurst or to, it wouldn't probably go all the way to Winfield Circle, but it would probably go as far as Parkhurst where it would terminate. So between Parkhurst and the interstate, that would be the portion that would still have to be done, and whether that's included in the interchange project or it's done as a separate short term or short project. You don't want to get too close to the interchange, because if you reconfigure those interchange ramp termini, they could shift to the south and to the north a little bit. So you don't want to have to put something in and then tear it out with that project.
So then it sounds like the Stagecoach Road might be potentially a separate project, and that's where that new apartment complex is, right? Fifth Street Place, and obviously, you know, Cavalier Crossing or whatever they're calling it now, University Place, one of those. That Wahoo Way is a lot of apartments with a lot of people. I mean, it's not all UVA students certainly, but a fair amount of people, and probably all of them commuting into town one way or another. And it's a pretty rough intersection right now. So, I mean, is that potentially a viable thing there, that Stagecoach Road stretch? Because you're saying that that's not included in the Old Lynchburg roundabout one, right?
Correct. I mean, we could definitely break this up into two projects where we go from Wahoo Way to Pinehurst, including Stagecoach Road intersection improvements is one project, and then everything south of Old Lynchburg, the Old Lynchburg Fifth Street intersection, is a second project.
I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense, given how many apartments have gone in there, and given the timing of Southwood coming in, and on the flip side, given the lower priority of District Avenue. But, you know, I don't want to step in here and dictate to you guys what the good idea is. You're obviously the experts, so. But if we can plug a gap, that seems pretty tempting, right?
Yeah, these are all high priority projects for the county. Yeah, you know, I'd like to hear from other folks if you know, VDOT or other people on the committee think that's a worthwhile exchange to do that with District Avenue. I will say that, you know, District Avenue has been on the board's list, and we've discussed that a number of times. That may be a priority, that if we make these applications for Fifth Street and don't do district through the PDC, the county may consider trying to do district as a county project. So it doesn't mean that we won't do that, but you know, I just want to make sure that you're aware that the board can make a decision to go after that District Avenue project anyway.
And I think personally, because of the public involvement and it has been vetted by our city council, it was a previous city council, it wasn't a current city council. But District Avenue is that last piece of the puzzle for the 29 hydraulic intersection. And then we can never speak of it again, which is really exciting to me. It's the timing issue is that, so our past round of applications for 29 and hydraulic, they're going to start rolling off in fiscal year 27 maybe. And then this one's going to be another, couple years out. If we get it in this round, if we push it to a different smart scale round, you're looking at, I don't know, a decade or more before this could be considered for construction. We don't take it lightly that we would have to take a duplex or any affordable housing, but looking at the grander scheme of the community and safety issues and what that could do for, again, a safer crossing for the pedestrians and residents that are still there, there is value. It's just cleaning up the 29 hydraulic intersection once and for all is very exciting. So that's why we considered it as one of our priority projects for the community.
Gotcha.
And I would agree with Jeanette on that. The other thing is, it is on the county-city boundary. So for the MPO to submit it, because it's a multi-jurisdictional project, it's cleaner. Whereas Fifth Street, most of those, at least south of 64, it's all in the county. So you wouldn't have to have the city's necessarily support of the county project to move that forward. The county could submit it. Whereas if the county wanted to submit a project that goes into the city, there's a few more hoops you have to jump through for that to go forward. So, and that's what I think, that leaving the District Avenue in the recommendations, either for the MPO or even for the PDC, I think is more advantageous than to have one jurisdiction submitted or another.
And then is the Hillsdale South extension, given, I guess, the cost kind of falling by the wayside at this point, like probably never gonna do that one? Because I'll admit, never talking about hydraulic 29 again sounds good to me.
With the
I
Hillsdale
wish I
South,
could,
go
yeah, I
ahead,
wish I
Chuck.
could say that it's got legs, but I did do well overall. But we had a lot more money in the pool this time than we do than possibly moving forward. It would only be eligible for high priority funding versus district grant funding. So, I mean, it competed, it was in the top 50% of the projects across the state. So I think it scores very well overall, and it's competitive. It's just, is it going to be competitive enough?
This is the other thing that I can suggest. Kevin's talking about Albemarle potentially having additional slots. The PDC itself has 4 applications that it can submit as well. So that's the other thing that we can be considering is what are the requests, and maybe if there's a second project on the Fifth Street corridor, we can revisit that with the PDC once the PDC is at a point where they're making recommendations for the projects to consider. Again, we don't have the same kind of process to do that with the PDC, so I can't necessarily guarantee, that would be up to the commission to approve which of those projects. We would have to wait till we get out the reserve bus, but both a second Fifth Street corridor project as well as Hillsdale could potentially be PDC projects, and then we would extend the opportunity to our localities to let us know if there are other projects that they would want to consider. PDC could potentially pick up 1 or 2 of these as well.
Tim?
And that would keep District Avenue as a city county for the MPO slot.
Tim?
I think this has been a really helpful discussion all the way around, and I think it's time for us to go back to the motion that was proposed by Kevin.
Sure. We didn't actually get that motion, so Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I make a motion that we recommend the 4 projects listed here to the policy board for inclusion as the MPO smart scale projects for 2022. That's District Avenue, Rivanna River Bridge, Avon Street Corridor, and 5th Street Corridor.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Can I just clarify that that includes the recommendation that the Rivanna River is the project that is recommended for additional engagement?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that should be included, but yes.
Thank you.
All right, and so again, we're only recommending one project for that engagement, right? For staff recommendation.
Correct.
Okay. Can we call?
Hey,
Go ahead, Chuck.
well, I would like to make one suggestion. Instead of for District Avenue, we might want to have that, instead of just being minimal, being moderate, or something, because I think there needs to be a little bit more engagement on that project moving forward, because we are going to have to modify it pretty significantly to over what it currently is. So it might be better to have, and it is in an area where we have had some issues in the past, and to make sure we get enough input from, especially the Meadows neighborhood area.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chuck, on that. And maybe that's why it may be better not to just say we have engagement on one project, but perhaps I'd just amend the motion to say to do the appropriate engagement on each of the projects, and we can come up with what that engagement plan will look like over the next, few meetings, something. Because I think all of them we're going to want at least some sort of engagement on, even if it is minimal or moderate. Would that be satisfactory to staff?
I think we just want to, I think maybe what we will clarify is that we will do at least a couple of public meetings for all of the projects. It's just a matter of, are there additional technical or stakeholder discussions that are needed for any of these projects? And those were the ones that we would want to specifically identify, just to set the expectation.
And I mean, I guess what I'd like to see is reaching out to the specific, both property owners and residents affected, to get their input.
Sure. So why don't I just clarify that when we bring this recommendation to the policy board, it sounds like there's going to be some additional engagement that's going to be needed for the District Avenue roundabout. And we will plan to provide at least some minimum level of engagement for all of the projects. Does that split the difference well?
That's fine.
Okay.
Is my motion still good then?
I'll second whatever that was.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Can we go ahead and call the roll?
Rory.
Aye.
Kevin.
Aye.
Dan.
Yes.
Wood.
Dane.
Christine.
Yes.
Jeanette.
Yes.
Steven.
Yes.
Tim.
Aye.
Juwan.
Aye.
Bill has left the meeting. Aye. And Chuck.
Aye.
That concludes the roll.
All right, so that motion carries. Only 30 minutes behind schedule, folks. So thank you for the presentation, Sandy, and for the great discussion, everyone. Next up, we've got our electric vehicle report. We're going to listen to her.
Okay, let me just pull up my screen.
And I'll add, we do 30 minutes of roundtable and matters from the public and no matters from, or no members of the public. So we're not too bad on time right now.
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my screen. Oh gosh.
You're just gonna use the Apple speaker.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I'm just trying to pull up my screen. I don't know why I can't seem to get back to Zoom. Can we get it on Zoom? Thank you. Okay. Apology. All right. You guys can see my PowerPoint slide?
Yep.
So in fiscal year 2021, we did an electric vehicle charging station study for the region. So it included the counties as well as the city. And we looked at the benefits of electric vehicle use. Right now, transportation is the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in the MPO area. And EVs produce a lot less emissions than the gas-powered vehicles. So it makes sense that with our goals of reducing emissions, that we look at using or promoting electric vehicles. And EV registrations are growing in the area and in the country. So we looked at the infrastructure that's supporting electric vehicles in the region, and we found the number of charging locations. And really interestingly, the number of charging locations in the area has increased almost twice as much in the past couple of years. So it's really catching on faster than we even expected. So we looked at what some of the barriers are to adopting EVs, and most of it is the cost to start up with purchasing them. And we also looked at like when you purchase one, how are you going to charge it? So a lot of people, especially residential, if you're going to purchase an EV, you want to be able to charge it at your home, which is the EPA reports that 80% of the privately owned vehicles the charging is completed at home. So we thought that that was a good way for this area to help support electric vehicles, is looking at ways that can support charging at home. So the number of housing units with parking that's suitable for a charger, it would have to be a house where or a housing unit where you have a parking space assigned to you and you are able to have electricity at that parking space. And you can see the number of, so we compared, the way that we figured to compare this was looking at single family units versus the number of attached units. And you can see that there's quite a few number of attached units in our area. There's about 40,000 housing units in the region with potential barriers to installing home charging facilities. So we looked at strategies to encourage this and support the installation of charging infrastructures. So, some of the recommendations of the report, and there's more, obviously details in the report, which is available on the website. Was to install charging infrastructure in public parking spaces that residents use to park overnight. So some interesting things that we found examples of this was in England. They are installing in some like boroughs and cities, they're installing EV chargers on light posts. So you can park, your vehicle on the street overnight as you normally do, but then plug your phone to charge it. Also, the cities and counties can provide guidelines for EV charging stations. This kind of signifies that the cities and counties support this, and it helps developers know what's expected. You can also develop local ordinances and policies to encourage new housing developments to include EV charging infrastructure. And one of the ways you can do this is make ready standards, which would encourage multifamily construction to provide electrical capacity necessary to accommodate future charging infrastructure. So it's really hard if you have a parking garage that's already built, to add in that electric infrastructure after it's been built. So you don't have to have the EV stations in the garage, you just have to make sure that they could be installed in the future. And then also the second place that most residential EVs are charged is at employers. And we're doing this now, but we could also encourage employers to install more charging stations for their employees. And that's the end of my presentation. Like I said, the EV report is on the website, and I've mailed it to some of you. I've gotten some comments back, which I incorporated into the report. Any questions?
I have a question. I haven't read the report, so you can tell me if this is in it, but I'm curious about where we stand in terms of electricity sourcing. I remember reading a report a few years ago that suggested an EV powered from a coal power plant was actually responsible for more emissions than a hybrid vehicle. So I'd love to know where we stand in terms of, are we actually transitioning to renewables to power our EVs?
So in the study, we focused on charging stations, but in the study, when I estimated the number of the emission savings that we would get from using EVs as opposed to gas, the production of the electricity was factored into that number. So if you're like really interested, I can send you a link to that study, but it's also in the report, and I have all the sources in the report as well.
Thanks, I'll take a look.
Hey, Lucinda. So, okay, I read your report, and then I also spoke to someone that actually had a Tesla. And I was amazed that basically you're not supposed to park in the spot. You use it for 15 minutes, you charge up, and then you have a range of 100 miles. So I understand we need a place to put these things. And I know batteries are improving. I was just surprised by that and had no idea that's what was happening. And then on the second thing, I finally went to Wawa. I went to Chris Green Lake up there. I was amazed at how many EV charger stations were included in that Wawa. So I'm wondering if that's the future of gas stations, is that it's going to be part gas and part EV, and maybe the private market will take care of this and we could work in concert with them. So anyway, that was just my 2 comments. Sorry for making this meeting longer.
Yeah, the Wawa has signed a agreement with Tesla to put charging stations at all of their gas stations in the future. So that's something that is happening. One of the things that I was thinking about with this study is that like most of the EV charging stations right now are in garages, at hotels, at the university, at the public garage. And a lot of those things are not quite accessible to people with low incomes. And I really wanted to make this accessible for everybody, because the people with the higher incomes can't afford to purchase EVs and get something set up for themselves, you know, in the garage or where they live. But the people, like lower income will not have as much access to it. So the charging stations at Walmart is good, but also, you know, being able to help facilitate charging where you park your car overnight, I think is a really good thing for us to do.
Tim?
Just a couple of points. EV sales have been down the last 3 years in the States. Obviously, this is the future until we see hydrogen or something else. So I'm really supportive of this. But I think that in the report, when you speak about the growth of vehicles 30 to 40%, we need to know whether that really is the case in Charlottesville, Albemarle, or else we ought to be using different figures. And the discussions that I'm hearing in the county, and maybe Kevin could jump into this since the county has put some units on the county office building site, is that there are at least 3 levels of charging. And then there's the issue about the proprietary Tesla charging stations versus the others, and that there's a lot of issues. It's just that putting in a charging station isn't really the issue anymore. Is it this really low speed charge? Is it this really high speed charge? And who actually gets to plug into it? And then of course, then there's the issue of, are you paying for it or is it free? Volkswagen is coming in with their set of places. If we may see in the infrastructure bill, it looks like that's pretty much cut out of it now, but there still is some portion for charging stations. So I think maybe since you've done this study, it's almost like there needs to be an update, because there are a number of issues that, at least in your quick summary report, really weren't touched on that I think are important. Thanks.
Thanks, I took notes. I'm gonna look into it, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say as a follow-up that I was asked by the Planning Commission to find out where we were in terms of the planning district on this, because of it being an interest and priority of a number of the planning commissioners in Albemarle County. And so they were asking those levels of specific questions. I don't think that the general report that you've just given us would be satisfactory to answer the kind of questions that they were asking. Kevin, do you want to jump in on any of that?
No, I think I need to dig into the report. I guess, although I do, from my review of it, which was, I didn't get into all the details, but I did go through it. I think I was kind of open for some maybe more specifics in the recommendations about ways that we can move forward as a region to try and advance the use of electric vehicles. And I just feel like the recommendations were on the a little more on the general side than what I was thinking, and also agree with Tim that like it's moving so fast right now that it quickly becomes out of date and needs follow-up.
I just wanted to mention and make everybody aware that the state, through the Department of Environmental Quality, does have a program where they're using the VW mitigation funds. These are the funds that Volkswagen had to essentially surrender as part of their diesel cheating scheme. And this DEQ, I believe, is partnered with EVgo to do the research and develop a statewide network of the really, really high capacity DC fast charging. It might be good to see if you guys could reach out to DEQ and get a sense of what their plans are on the I-64 corridor and vis-a-vis, in Charlottesville, because I think, there's some funds that are sloshing around there, so there might be some opportunities to leverage some resources. Additionally, I threw in the chat a link to the Colorado DOT statewide plan that they had developed. I sat in on a presentation about a month ago, and their person that headed this was talking about it and talking about developing, a set of like community goal or statewide goals, like what is an acceptable level of access across the state of Colorado. I mean, it might be interesting to consider some level of analysis like that, that ends up getting a little more geographically specific for the Charlottesville region. And just generally my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just want to mention this was a very, the amount of resources that we dedicated to this in the UPWP was pretty limited. It was a very small project. We didn't really have the resources and the capacity to do the types of analysis that you all are speaking of. But if this is a high priority, we can certainly go back and look at the MPO, resources and allocation and do something that's a little bit more intensive if this is one of the priorities for the region.
I just also, to Tim and Lucinda, I passed this on, this draft that you had provided previously to some folks that are leading our environmental group, Gabe Daly in our office here. And he was going to give it a review, and I'd like to get back with him and see if he had suggestions, because he's really at the forefront of what Albemarle County is working on. So Tim, I can make sure that you are in contact with him if you haven't talked, if this is something that you want to look at. But maybe Lucinda, if we could just, before putting the final buttons on this study, maybe quickly reach out to Gabe and see if he has any specific thoughts on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and to Wood's point, I think, or I'm pretty certain that the market or the Water Street garage chargers that were installed by the city were actually those EVgo chargers funded by the VW funds. Though I believe they're still pretty steep in like price to use. I think it's something like $5 plus 20 cents a minute or something. But I think it's a very interesting report. I'm particularly interested in the make ready standards that seem like the kind of most actionable thing that we can do to really future-proof ourselves and whether we should create incentives or even requirements to have that like higher amperage service to allow electric charging in the future. One thing I would consider is that it's not necessarily just for multifamily or even for residential. And actually, I would add that I think there's a page in the report that talks about percentage of people in single-family detached homes. But I would say attached homes probably, for the most part, have driveways and their own electric service that can potentially have access. So it's probably more people in more than single-family attached, like multifamily units that have issues with charging or potentially parking the street. I know a guy who has Tesla who used to live downtown and parked on the street. And what he ended up doing was getting his office to install a charger and kind of flip the script. Instead of charging at night, he would charge all day when he commuted out of downtown. So that might be potentially one path to pursue. But I'm inclined to say that we shouldn't put too much extra effort in the work program into this for the reason that Jeanette said, is that the landscape is really changing, and for the most part the kind of market or the private environment is probably going to take care of it kind of more or less on the whole. And so that said, I've been really surprised and impressed at how much usage I've seen those county chargers getting. So I'd be interested in a report once you guys have one of those of how much usage you're seeing out of those. And maybe it's just because they're free and there and people are spending all day downtown, but they do seem quite popular, but good work.
Hey, this is Chuck. I just wanted to point out, I think this is a lot of good information. I was just reading an article in Interesting Engineering today about a study that's going on about in-road wireless charging for electric vehicles. It's sponsored in Indiana with Purdue, University of Purdue, and a German company, and they're looking at doing actually installing it on the interstate for testing to see if it's going to work. So, I mean, there's a lot of innovations coming along that may revolutionize the whole charging situation, where you don't even have necessarily charging stations. You might have an area you just drive into a park and automatically charges your vehicle. So, yeah, I agree with Rory that I think this is a good start, but we're going to be continuously updating this study moving forward as new technology comes on. So it may just be have this go forward and then we look at it again in the future.
Oh yeah, actually that reminds me, another thing to consider that I didn't see in the report is V2G technology, vehicle to grid, where, in addition to being just batteries to power your car, a lot of the time these are just batteries full of energy that are sitting around, and as more intermittent renewable energy is added to the grid, wind power that only produces when the wind is blowing, solar that produces during the day when it's not cloudy. There's becoming a real demand, within utilities for storage or other ways like demand shifting, to shift demand and supply to balance out the grid, as these intermittent power sources change in availability. So of course we've seen that big Dominion pilot with electric school buses, where Dominion's aim is to get these school buses when they're sitting around to be these big batteries for them to draw some power from. And I believe Albemarle County or the state in Albemarle County issued a grant to a local company to work on V2G or V2X technology. Is that right? It's Blake Stairs. I don't know. I think that's
I don't know about the grant. I know one of the previous, he's an instructor at UVA, David Slutsky. Basically, he has spent a lot of time and effort in doing a lot of research and developing. That's what his company does. They look for opportunities for that, especially for fleets, for 8 businesses and fleets where they use those, basically go all electric, and you can charge in the evening, and when the vehicles aren't using, you can use them as a source to cut some of the peak periods supply down. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that realm that could be included too. That's why I said there's a lot of avenues here that we could look into.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's a big field. It's changing a lot. And actually, I work in a company that kind of works sort of in that space in demand shifting. So, certainly there's a lot going on. Maybe a little bit is kind of out of the scope of this electric vehicle study, but as we plan this infrastructure, and particularly, like Chuck said, that fleet infrastructure. I know people are kind of talking about battery electric buses. Certainly, the schools have made their application to do that. Getting that like two-way technology, and in particular, inverters that can both charge and discharge is probably an important consideration and potentially a revenue source to offset costs. So I'm gonna think about it.
I have 2 small points. One, on the electric heavy vehicle front, I just wanted the report to reflect that DRPT does have a program that funds electric buses. 2, Blacksburg has, I think, now 5 of these on the road. So if people are interested, they're using them in regular transit service at this point. And I know Jaunt has also done some work with EV transit vehicles. So on the transit side, there is a growing interest in understanding how that technology can help supplement things like natural gas vehicles or diesel, or even be a replacement.
If I can jump in just for maybe to give us a path forward here. So the EV study itself was actually an FY 21's work program. It's not included as part of the work program in FY 22. But we do have this climate action initiatives research that we have included. So my thought is that we can take some of these suggestions and start looking forward as we think through the climate action initiatives and how to incorporate those into our long range planning and other transportation planning processes. And maybe fold in a significant electric vehicle component as we do that research, since it supports the overall climate action initiatives moving forward. Hearing that you all, it sounds like really want more of a deeper level technical analysis and ongoing sort of research and understanding about how the field's changing and how the technology is utilized. If that sounds like it supports the feedback that we're hearing right now.
I mean, Sandy, that certainly resonates with what I've been thinking, is that we need to make sure that any additional work that we do on this does fit into the approved UPWP, and that it doesn't become something that we just continue updating as everything changes. This could be one of those studies that never ends. So I do think we need like a natural terminus for what has been completed now at the level and at the altitude that it was expected to be. And then we figure out other ways, either through climate action or through revisions to the UPWP, if this truly is a priority that just wasn't identified through that process.
The other thing is when you go through, start to update to the long range plan, that's going to be an opportunity to include a lot of this information in that plan. And that's going to start next spring. So that might be an opportunity to where we can really take a deeper dive into it.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree that I think it's something we keep in mind as we create plans moving forward. I know it's a little bit incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan draft, and in particular as we make infrastructure investments. But I don't necessarily see an immediate need to add to the work program to put a lot more work into the study now. Maybe at some point a couple years in the future, it'll be we'll see this study as out of date rather than just limited in scope, and do more stuff then. But I think for right now, this product is pretty good.
Thanks, you guys. I look forward to working on it more.
Thanks, Lucinda. So next up, we've got Sarah with rideshare updates.
Okay, so I'm going to switch the order here just a little bit. Since Acton Express, this is really the time to get it in front of you guys before it takes off. So I'm sure you've heard this mentioned a little throughout time, but the Acton Express is going to be a transit service for commuters that will run from Stanton, Fishersville, Waynesboro to Charlottesville and Fifth Street Station area. This is an area that has been studied and looked at many, many times with how best to address all the folks that are making this trip on a regular basis. So we have many partners that are involved with the Acton Express, including all of the localities that the bus service will be stopping at and serving. A quick just view for you on the morning boarding and the drop-offs. This service is looking and hoping to start as quickly as September 1st, which is why we thought that this was so important for you guys to see it before it might be up and running. So it's stopping, you can see here on our side at the Fifth Street station there at Wegmans. There's also an additional service there at the Cat Bus stop. It is stopping at a couple of locations at UVA, both in the academic side as well as the health side, and then of course the downtown transit center as well. Just again, a quick snapshot of what the service will look like. The website for this service is up and running, so all of this information is there that you guys can find and locate. It is being serviced by the Bright bus system, since it is originating on that side of the mountain, and CSPDC, our counterparts across the mountain, are the folks that secured the demonstration grant for this. The cost to ride, we're looking at a $3 fare for each way. So if you were taking it both, which most people would be, it would be $6. They're also doing a fare card that could offer some cost savings, since they are anticipating folks to be riding it on a fairly regular basis. So also the month of September will be free, which is perfect timing with track transit from DRPT. We had a lovely photo shoot that both our office and the CSPDC got to participate in, and as you can see, we've got some cool stuff here with this. Best part is all of the amenities. You know, we have heard for many, many years about the treacherous and the, driver of the mountain that everyone hates. So the good news is, hence the tagline, "Our Drive, Your Destination," is now that passengers can take part in a lot of amenities with this. The seats are very nice, high-backed, very cushy. There is overhead storage for items. It is wheelchair accessible. There will be bike racks and Wi-Fi, so folks can just sit back and relax on that drive across the mountain. We have begun starting some marketing and promotion for this particular service, obviously leading up to that September 1st launch. So like I said, the website just became live this week. They have secured their presence on social media, so they're looking for new followers to help get the word out. All of that info is on their website and will be on the rideshare website as well. So just kind of stay tuned for a lot of outreach and to hopefully be hearing about the service quite a bit in the next month as we approach that launch, and then a little bit after that as well. Again, there is the website information. That was a quick version, but open to any questions on this particular topic if you have them.
I just want to say I'm really excited that this is happening. I think this is great. I also want to throw out that those are a lot of the same stops that we use for the Crozet Connect and some of our other Connect routes. So I just want to reiterate that I look forward to the day when we've got some really good transfer options with CAT, that we can leave all of those UVA and downtown connections to CAT and have a really consistent, reliable transfer, on the north, south, east, and west sides of Charlottesville that we can connect to. So looking forward to that.
I concur, Stephen. There is a lot of opportunity with getting this service up and running, where it can plug individuals into Jaunt, CAT, and UTS. And, once it's there, I think we'll see even more connections and how all of those can work together. All right, so real quick, rideshare. So with the program being part of the DRPT commuter assistance programs, or CAPS for short, we apply for funding every year in February and then develop a work plan. This particular work plan has went through both DRPT and then our commission here at TJPDC, but we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update as to what to look forward to in the coming fiscal year. So again, some of the promotions that we're doing. Number one, Afton Express. That again is going to tie nicely into Tri-Transit and probably Rideshare Week, which are our fall events. We will obviously continue to promote telework. I think most folks are getting used to that and accustomed to it, but there are still ways that we can hopefully make it better for some employers. We of course like to participate and partner with programs for Earth Week. And then in May, we have Clean Commute and also Bike Month. One of the reasons I wanted to throw this part out there is we are always looking for community partners in how we can tie TDM into what they're doing or the needs of their particular clients. So these are kind of some of the things that we have on the table, but we're also, open to ways that we can work these in with existing programs and existing organizations through the community. The other big item that we have coming up for this particular fiscal year is our marketing research and implementation proposal. So we are seeking some outside help to make sure that we are positioning rideshare in the best possible way for this particular region. So we are going to take a deep dive into some research to make sure that we are identifying all of the key markets and audiences that we need to be reaching, really making sure that we're developing the right messaging for those particular audiences, working to strengthen our brand awareness with this being such a transient community with people moving in and out, with UVA and other things. We are always looking to strengthen our brand awareness in the area. We will also be creating a marketing implementation plan based on this proposal that will include all mediums, both print, TV, radio, and digital, and then also, of course, for our special promotions and events, and then some updated printed materials. It has been a while since rideshare has looked into these things, and we feel like coming out the beginning of this pandemic is a really good time to step back, evaluate what we're doing, and making sure that we are being as effective as possible. Quickly, I love this graphic. I know you guys have probably seen it a million times, but one of the big things with both the county and the city taking on a lot of climate action is TDM is a wonderful pairing and component of how we can impact the environment. And I think the pandemic was a perfect example to show how big of an impact TDM can have in that particular arena. So that's probably a wonderful area and a place that we will be doing some extensive messaging as well. Speaking of telework, real quick, just a plug again, always for Telework VA, which is a program of DRPT that we partner with. We have lots of services to make sure that employers are, equipped to have the most effective telework program they can have. Even if a place already has one, we have contracted out with professionals and experts to make sure that you're getting the most out of your telework program. So those are free services that we will happily connect anyone with. We, of course, still have our app. There are the snapshots of kind of what it looks like and what it looks like in the App Store. This is where folks can log their trips. They can also search for carpool matches. They can search for van pools, input their transit or biking miles, and the more alternative trips you take, the more points you get, the more rewards you can get in the end. This is just a quick snapshot of kind of what the dashboard in that looks like. So it gives a lot of data for how these alternative trips are impacting our particular area. And as a member, you get your own snapshot to see your impacts, which I think can be really motivational to folks once they finally see it. And again, quick snapshot, that's me. Please feel free if you have any thoughts or ideas for partnerships to reach out to me. And of course, I will take any questions. Hopefully that wasn't too quick.
Yeah, Sarah, with the Afton Express, that was demonstration project funds that have that running. How long do those funds last, and what's the idea for what happens after that?
Let's see. I believe it was everyone signed on for 3 years for that. The demonstration funds, I think, mostly support it for the first couple of years. And then there was an additional cost to all of the partners that were supporting that would kind of incrementally creep up so that it would be mostly supported outside of that particular demonstration grant program. The plan for after those 3 years, I do not know exactly. I think that the real tell on that will be how well it goes in this particular first year. I know CSPDC is looking at that though.
All right, thanks.
Hey, if it's really successful, is there an opportunity to expand it service on adding buses?
My guess would be yes. What that threshold exactly would look like, I don't know at this moment, but I imagine like most new and wonderful transit services, if they get a ton of success with this, then expansion will be the next step.
And I can speak to those too a little bit. DRPT is working closely with Bright on setting up and then monitoring all the performance data associated with this route, because it's being funded through our demonstration program, which tends to have kind of a finite period. And then we generally like to see the services transition into kind of a regular operating program. But we're going to be watching the numbers very carefully and monitoring service, given the current situation and everything. I think, we'll just be interested to see what happens in terms of ridership. But so yes and yes, opportunities for expansion, opportunities for, route modifications based on what we see in the way of data coming in.
And again, I cannot tell you how many times this particular commute issue has been studied and looked at and evaluated. And, frankly, folks have been asking for this service for 10 plus years that I know of. So long time coming, folks. So we're very, very excited.
Very, very cool. Thank you, Sarah. Very excited for Aspen Express and for all rideshare stuff going on right now at such an important time when people are reforming their habits for some people the first time ever. So cool. So I know we're past our time here. I know some people might have hard stops. Are you guys generally good to power through, get through the MPO updates? All right, let's do it. So let's go on to Sandy and Lucinda with MPO updates and the Route 29 cargo study.
Oh, okay, we're skipping the engagement plan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess that is, yeah, also under MPO updates.
I'll be quick. Actually, I didn't even need to share. So the MPO updated our public engagement plan last year, and we got a lot of comments and feedback that were more in depth. So we decided to re-update it more in depth with fiscal year 2021. The engagement plan, well, it's called the Public Participation Plan by the FTA, and it's required by the HMPO to have a public participation plan to show how we will have a process to involve interested and affected individuals, organizations, and government entities, and in developing and adopting MPO planning documents. So we looked at a bunch of other MPOs, public participation plans, and we really liked Richmond's, which changed the name to an engagement plan, which we also did too. And we based our update on Richmond's plan, but we also used some other things that we liked from other plans. We worked with CTAC to kind of refine it and make sure we had everything in there for our community. And it's been on the website and open for public comment for several months now. We are going to have a public hearing and present it to the MPO Policy Board at their next meeting. And I guess that we would like any comments from you. And I don't know if we need them to make a recommendation for the Policy Board.
I don't think they're required to make a recommendation to the policy board, but if you have any feedback, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I don't have anything specific, but I would probably add that, like, it would be helpful to have like a difference for a red line version of changes between this one and the previous one. I'm sure the policy board would appreciate that when they review it.
It would all be red, right?
Yeah, it's like.
It's like completely reformatted.
Other thoughts? All right, do we want to make a recommendation or just, I guess we don't need one, so. Next presentation, I guess, is the Route 29 corridor study.
So this study, I think I introduced it to you in the past, so we're just giving an update, and I'll be quick as well. We've had a bunch of meetings with the stakeholders. We've drafted a framework document and drafted project goals. The team has done this, not just us. We're working with VDOT and Carolson as a consultant. So we've drafted the project goals, which are to improve safety, manage congestion, increase multimodal usability and accessibility, support future growth, and support economic development. We're still refining those, and we will ask for public comment as well on those. And once they're finalized, I'll put them up on our website. VDOT has their website up right now, and our website will be up very soon on the project. So we are working on future no-build conditions analysis, and then we will have a public workshop and stakeholder meetings in September to refine the goals and objectives. Then we will identify areas for improvement and draft solutions to those ideas, and then have a second public workshop probably in, let's see, in August.
This is the first or the second?
The second. No.
Probably not that quickly, but maybe in the early mid-fall.
Yeah. And then we develop an alternatives matrix and draft strategies, and then have a final alternatives and management report. I can, if you guys have questions or something, I can answer them without comments or.
Cool, any questions? Doesn't seem like it. All right, thanks. So I guess next up is roundtable updates. I guess in the interest of time, I'll just say unmute yourself and speak up, or raise your hand if you have any updates you'd like to share.
This for CAT, there's a real quick, we're in the process of presenting our new routes to the public. So tomorrow is our second meeting, and we're hoping to be able to launch our new routes by September. And once we do that, we're obviously, we got the fare free going on, but we'll also start a capital project study to see how we could better serve the 29 area as well. So that's all coming down the pipeline.
Very cool. And that's at 6 p.m. tomorrow, right?
6 p.m. tomorrow, virtual.
Awesome. Thanks. Jeanette.
Okay, so August 11th, we're going to have a public meeting regarding Belmont Bridge replacement project and just an update on construction, what to expect, detours, who to contact if you have any questions. So that's already on the city's calendar on how to register with Zoom. I'll be sending out an invite to our project mailing list. And if anyone wants it here, I can send it to you as well if you wanted to get it out to anyone. And that's it.
Thanks. Anyone else have updates? Looks like a no. Looks like we don't have any matters from the public since we have no members of the public. So with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks you all. Thank you all so much for being here and for going a little over time. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.